This week's parsha is Parshas Vayera, and on this parsha, we study the most classic passage from this parsha to study. Paragraph is to study the Akedah. The Akedah is where the nearest sacrifice of Yitzchak. And, you might think, we study this every year. Now we study it every year. We also read it on Rosh Hashanah. Not only that, many of us read it every day. Passage of the Akedah is in our Siddur at the very beginning. And where Hashem commands Abram to sacrifice Yitzchak, or he commands him to take him up as an offering. And you might have thought, what can we learn from this? Something new. But actually, this year, when I was reading it, I saw a new source I never saw before, and a shocking source I'd never seen before. And I want to connect that to a classical source that some of you might be familiar with, you might not, but here's the source that I saw. I saw it in the commentary of the Baal HaTurim, which I have from Rabbi Mintz's library. Those of you who don't know the Baal HaTurim, just to give you a little bit of his history, he was born in Cologne in Germany, probably around the year 1269. He was the third son of the great Rabbi, the Rosh, and he was his third son of the Rabbeinu Asher ben Rabbi Chiel and Yuta, and he studied with his father, and then he was a genius. He became an expert in the Talmud and the Tosafists, and he eventually absorbed everything, and he was the author of the classical work, the Tur Shulchan Aruch. But in 1303, after the Rindfleisch massacres, where the Mordechai was killed, and Mordechai was killed in 1297 in the Rindfleisch massacres, the Rosh left the Germanic lands, and he moved to southern France, and first in Savoy and then in Provence, but he didn't stay there. Instead, he went to Spain, and in 1304 in Spain, he spent 8 days in Barcelona as a guest of the Rashba. He stayed at the Rashba's house. And finally, in 1305, he went to Toledo, and the Rosh went to Toledo, where he was made the rabbi of the great synagogue of Toledo until his death. The Baal HaTurim, the Rosh died in 1327. Rabbeinu Yaakov, his third son, he left Germany in 1303, and he settled in Barcelona. And then he eventually moved to a community outside of Toledo, where his brother, Rabbi Chiel, was the rabbi, and he lived with his brother for a few years until his brother, Rabbi Chiel, died. And then in 1314, Rabbi Yaakov lived with his father and brothers in Toledo. So this person, this great genius, who we're going to share with you in a moment about him, he was such an incredible genius, but he couldn't make a living. And so he always begging from others for support. And he served on the Beis Din, and even though he was working as a judge, he refused to take money for the service. So we know almost nothing about him, his family, his marriage, and his children, but we do know that he had one son and one daughter. And so basically, at some point, there's a rumor that he went to the land of Israel, but he was buried in Toledo. So this Rabbi Yaakov ben Asher, he wrote the classic work of that was the basis for the Shulchan Aruch, called the Tur, which divided up Jewish law into 4 major categories. And those 4 categories are Orach Chaim, Choshen Mishpat, Yeridea, Even Ezer. Orach Chaim deals with daily living, goes through the day, how you just conduct Jewish law of the day. Choshen Mishpat is civil cases. Yeridea are matters where you have to rule, is it permitted or prohibited? And Even Ezer is matters relating to marriage. In addition to that, he wrote a commentary on the Torah called the Baal HaTurim. And the legend is, I haven't researched this to know if there's any basis or if it's just legend, but the legend is that he wrote this commentary in one night. This unbelievable commentary on the Torah, that he wrote it in one night. So this is what the Baal HaTurim says, this commentary that I have not seen until today, when I was preparing for our Torah study. This is what the Baal HaTurim says, this commentary on the portion. He says like this. It says in the verse, after the angel calls out to Abraham, and it says, and the angel says, do not slaughter Isaac. And then Abraham lifts up his eyes, and behold, he sees a ram that's caught in the thickets. And Abraham goes, and he takes the ram and brings it up as an offering. And Abraham calls the name of that place Hashem Yireh, God will see. And as it is said this day, Bahar Hashem Yireh, the mountain Hashem will be seen on the mountain. And then an angel calls out to Abraham a second time from heaven. So after the angel told him not to slaughter Isaac, an angel calls out a second time from heaven. And the angel says, swear to me, says God, Kiyan asher asita to the He says, the angel says, I swear, because you have done this thing. What have you done? You've done this beautiful thing. You have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Now you have not withheld your son. Well, earlier it says, you have not withheld your son from me. Now it just says you have not withheld your son. But now the verse says, this is the verse that I want to focus on from the Baal HaTurim, Ki varech avarachecha, because it says, I shall bless. He says, I shall surely bless you, Ki varech avarachecha, v'harba harbe ezeracha, and I will increase your seed, Kekochvei hashamayim, like the stars of the sky, ukachol v'kachol asher al sfas hayam, and like the sand on the sea, v'yirash zaracha et sha'ar oivav, and your seed will inherit the gate of his enemy. Now, I had read this verse many times, and I never translated any other way. I always translated it like that. But the kachol, the word kachol, the Baal HaTurim, gives us an unbelievable explanation. He says, be b'masoret. He said the Masoretic note has the word bet here. So what does that mean? What does that mean by the Masoretic note has the letter bet? What is this a reference to? So what is the Baal HaTurim even saying? So in order to understand that, we have to say that when the Baal HaTurim wrote his commentary, he incorporated within it the notes of the Balei HaMasorah. Who are these Balei HaMasorah? These were people, anonymous. We don't know their names. I don't think we know any of their names. I could be wrong, but I certainly don't know any of their names. These are scholars who were living in the post-Talmudic period in Jerusalem and Tiberia. So these scholars are known as the Balei HaMasorah, and they studied the Tanakh in very close, careful studying it, and they wrote notes, very, very elliptical notes, telling us how many times a word or a phrase appears in one book of the Bible or in the entire Bible, and how many and which verses begin and end with that same letter or the same word. So and sometimes when it's written and the word is written in a usual form, they would write note on the side of it. Now, these notes, which you probably haven't seen because they appeared in many old printed editions and in old manuscripts, but today they're almost never there. You won't notice it. Maybe they're in the back of the Chumash in small print, like people, they're not in the traditional, the typical Bibles that we use today. And most of the people thought, most people thought that these were the notes to help the scribes not make an error. Like that they want to make sure that the scribe copied it properly and they didn't make an error. But the Baal HaTurim understood these notes, these very, like, sometimes a note was just a lamed or a bet or a bet, bet, lamed, meaning to say, if it would be bet, lamed, it would mean that it appears twice with two different meanings, meaning the word appears twice in the Bible, but each time we should understand it differently. So the Baal HaTurim was understood this to mean that these were commentaries, that people weren't allowed to write commentaries on the Talmud because everybody was memorizing the oral tradition. And so therefore they would just write their commentary with very, very short elliptical note. And so therefore the Baal HaTurim interpreted these notes and he explained them to us. So this verse, V'kachol asher al sfas hayam, like the sand on the sea. This word, kachol asher al sfas hayam, the Baal HaTurim notes that there is a Masoretic note bet here. But really the bet is actually the bet lamed. So this word appears twice. Kachol asher al sfas hayam appears twice. This phrase V'chachol asher al sfas hayam appears twice, and the word v'chachol appears twice, and it has two different meanings. So we translated it here that it is like the sand at the seashore, but he's telling us that this word appears elsewhere. Now, I don't expect anybody to know where else it appears because you have to be a genius. Maybe if you're a winner of the Chidona Tanakh, you'll know where else it appears. But the Baal HaTurim was an absolute genius. And he tells us it appears, even you could Google it and you won't be able to tell us where it appears. But he says it appears in the verse in Job, chapter 29, verse 18, which states, V'chachol arbe yamim. And like the chol, I will live long days. So does anybody know what that is a reference to? I had no idea. I had never ever heard this before, and but you can find this also in the Mincha Shai. The Mincha Shai is printed in the back of the Mikros Gedolos, and he said he has a different version, and his version is. Well, anyway, let me first finish the Baal HaTurim. And he says, "V'zeu shenemar ki kimei ha'etz yemei ami shiftichu gam kein ba'arichos yamim." So what is he saying? He says, and this indicates, as does the verse, ki kimei ha'etz yemei ami, for the lifetime of my people will be like the lifetime of a tree that God promised Avram long life. What does that mean? What does that mean? I mean, this is such a elliptical comment of the Baal HaTurim. It's a mystery to me. And here he has this verse. He says there's another verse in Job 29:18, and basically that it's telling us that you'll be given a long life. But thank God, Rabbi Mintz has a beautiful edition of the Baal HaTurim, which was put out by Art Scroll. It's a great edition, and this was written by Rabbi Avi Gold, and he has beautiful footnotes here, and he cites the Mincha Shai, who states Chad Lashon Chol. One form of this word v'chachol refers to sand. V'chad Shem Ha'of v'leis dekavason, and one is the name of a bird, and there's nothing like it. Nothing like it. One is the name of a bird, and there's nothing like it. What's he referring to? So when it says v'kachol arbe yamim, this is like the chol, a phoenix-like bird. I will live long days. That is a reference to a bird that's like the phoenix, like the mythical phoenix. That even though the bird is, when it dies, it rises from the ashes again. Hold on. So Sheldon's telling me, Rashi on that verse in Job tells us there's a bird named Chol, upon which the punishment, right. So this is what I was about to read from here. Thank you, Sheldon. but I wouldn't have known to check that Rashi in Job because I probably would have been lazy. But the commentary here tells us that Rashi, and Sheldon cited for me the Rashi sent it, so I'll just read what Sheldon said. That the Rashi on the verse in Job tells us that there's a bird named Chol, phoenix, upon which the punishment of death was not decreed because it did not taste of the tree of knowledge. And at the end of 1,000 years, it renews itself and returns to its youth. So therefore, what the Baal HaTurim is telling us is that there was this word vikachol appears twice. Here, it refers to just like the sand of the sea, that he's being blessed like the sand of the sea. But in Job, it refers to the bird, which we could call colloquially the phoenix, that will not die, that we are being compared to the bird of the phoenix. And the Jewish people, even when we grow, even when we are struggling, and we might think we're about to be destroyed, we will rise up from the ashes. The lifetime of a people will be like the lifetime of a tree, meaning that Hashem is promising Avram long life, but really the Jewish people are being promised that we will rise up from the ashes. By the way, what people has risen up from the ashes? Literally, like the Jewish people. So first of all, just pause for a second and say, what an incredible Rashi that if I knew, I forgot. I'm sure, while I speak about it, I think I remembered it, but I certainly didn't focus on it, that there is this bird-like substance, that this bird-like creature that will rise up from the ashes. But what's its connection? Why is the Baal HaTurim citing it here? What are the Masoretes telling us? The Anshe Masorah, by associating it with the near sacrifice of Yitzchak. So about this, we do have some guidance here. Just 1 second. I know people have some questions. Just let me speak for another 5 minutes, and then we'll take some questions about this. We do have some guidance here, and that is that there is a tradition, there is one strain of commentary within the Jewish exegetical approaches to the Akedah that says that Isaac indeed was slaughtered and he was reduced to ashes, burnt on the altar, and then after he was slaughtered and reduced to ashes, Hashem resurrected him from those ashes. That Abraham did in fact, and this appears in the Talmud in several places. There are several references to this in the Talmud. One of the references to, and by the way, if you want to read a great book on this topic, you would read Shalom Spiegel's The Akedah, The Last Child by Shalom Spiegel. But it says in the verse, in chapter 22, verse 14, Vayikra Avraham Shem Makomahu, and God called the place Hashem Yireh, Hashem will see. Asher Ye'amar Hayom, that is said today that this is the place that Hashem will see. So I found a few weeks ago, I went to Temple. I forget if it's one on Military Road. I think it's Temple Micah or Sinai. I think it's Micah. I forget what it's called. It's on Military Road. Temple Sinai. Yeah, Temple Sinai. So they're wonderful people, wonderful. And they have extra books in their library, which they said we'd love to have in the yeshiva. And so I took a set with their blessings of Torah Shlema by Rabbi Menachem Kasher. And he cites every midrash, very most comprehensive citation of the midrashim on each verse. So we have the whole set now in our yeshiva. Incredible work of scholarship. And Rabbi Kasher says, Hashem Yireh. So that this is the verse that's called Hashem Yireh, that Hashem will be seen, Hashem Yireh. So the verse states in Zevachim, this reference, the Talmud refers to the ashes of Isaac in a few places. One place is in Tainus, that on a fast day, when we're trying to arouse compassion from God, we're supposed to put the ashes on our forehead to remind Hashem of the ashes of Isaac. What ashes? Rashi in Leviticus 26, chapter 26, verse 42, also says, Rashi, the Leviticus 26:42 tells us, it says in the verse, V'zacharti esprisi Yaakov, and remember my covenant of Jacob, v'af esprisi Yitzchak, also my covenant of Isaac. Well, what does it mean, my covenant of Isaac? Rashi tells us there, what's the covenant of Isaac? Rashi says, well, Lama Nimnu Avot Choranit. So Rashi says, why is it saying the verse backwards? It says, I'll remember the covenant of Jacob, then remember the covenant of Isaac, and then I'll remember the covenant of Abraham. So why does it say it backwards? That's what Rashi's question is. And he says it's to tell us, Kedayu Yaakov HaKatan Lakach. Even Jacob, the smallest one, is worthy to save everyone. V'im'eno Kedai, and if he's not worthy, Hare Yitzchak imo, Isaac is with him. And if he's not worthy, Hare Avram imo, Abraham is worthy. V'lama lo nemra zechira b'Yitzchak. Why does it say, I'll remember Yaakov and the covenant of Isaac, and Abraham I'll remember? It skips memory by Isaac. Because what's the reason why it says, it doesn't say I'll remember Isaac? It says, Rashi says, because the ashes of Isaac are always right in front of me, placed upon the altar. And we see several times the ashes of Isaac being referred to. And the Talmud in Zvachim 62a says, Mizbeach minayadeh. How are the Jewish people going to know where the Mizbeach is, where the altar is in the temple? How are we going to know where the place of the altar is? So the Talmud tells us in Zvachim 62a, Ra'u Mizbeach banoi, they saw an altar, Umichael Hasara Gadol Omeinu Makriv, and the archangel Michael was offering on it. But that's the first explanation. The second explanation is Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha tells us, Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha tells us, Amar Efro Shel Yitzchak Avinu Ra'u. They saw the ashes of Isaac, Shemunach Ba'osa Makom. They were placed in that spot. So these were the ashes of Isaac. And so therefore, we're seeing from here that the ashes of Isaac, the Talmud tells us also, were hidden, and God looks at them and remembers them. And so what are these ashes of Isaac? And so Spiegel argues in the last trial that there was an association that especially after many children were murdered during the Crusades. In fact, some of them were killed by their own parents to save them from being kidnapped by the Christians. That we see from here that there was a tradition that Isaac was actually slaughtered by Abraham, and then to be resurrected. And so this was a source of hope and inspiration. And the Baal HaTurim, who was coming from this place where he saw his entire community wiped out in the Rindfleisch massacre, the Rindfleisch massacres of 1297, and he ran away also, and he saw his whole community destroyed. He finds in this verse this connection to the phoenix bird, where we will rise again like the ashes. That this is a reference to a blessing to Abraham, that his descendants will rise again like the ashes. So I wanted to just point that out, that the Sakeda, that there is a strain of thought, obviously, that the common interpretation is that Abraham never slaughtered Isaac, but there's another very strong approach within Ashkenazi commentaries of the Middle Ages that says that Isaac was indeed slaughtered by Abraham, only to be resurrected. And that would be a source of inspiration and strength to all of us, especially to them, when they saw the tremendous tragedy that they had lived through, that they were saying that we are going to have a chance to be resurrected, like Isaac, like the phoenix bird. We will rise again from the ashes. Okay, let me stop the recording here. And I saw that Bruce is raising his hand.